please share your thoughts in comments and like this video. The story starts with the great sage Gramios, who had reached the pinnacle of magic. He places 2 powerful magical restraint seals on his hands. With those seals, he is devoted to reincarnating in the future. A few weeks ago, Gramios ventured into a deserted place, and he used a powerful summoning magic there. Soon the space before him cracked, and a demon appeared from the other side. It is furious as someone just disturbs its sleep. The demon was curious to see which insignificant fool did that to him. Then it found Sage Gramios in front of him. It mocks Gramios for his size and for being an ordinary human being, but it still recognizes Gramios for his skills for using high-level magic to summon him. In this world, humans and demons are always at odds with each other. So the demon asks Gramios if he is changing his side after knowing they will crush the humans. But Gramios was rather annoyed due to its loud noise. Gramios revealed that he summoned the revered demon lord for defeating him. In the usual way, one had to enter the demon realm to face him. But Gramios felt it was a pain to go through all that. Hearing this, the demon laughs and agrees that it was difficult to defeat him in his own world. This desolated rocky mountain is also a perfect place for him and human troops to hide easily. The demon soon finds a place which would be more suitable for sneak attack and believes that Gramios' forces are hiding there. Soon it attacked that place to kill the insects there. Soon the rocky mountain collapsed and the demon expected to hear the agony of humans. But that wish never came true. The demon just stood there after being humiliated. Gramios countered. He could hear the rocks falling instead. The demon looked all over the area and was surprised that Gramios was alone. The demon asked Gramios why he used all his magical powers and summoned him here. Gramios once again replied that it was troublesome to go to the demon realm, so he wanted to fight with the demon here and called him. Hearing Gramios' answer, the demon was furious, but it didn't dislike such an arrogant human. At first, the demon wanted to kill Gramios slowly, but to honor his arrogance, it decided to give him a swift death. The demon casted numerous magic circles around its arms and reinforced it. With that punch, it planned to flatten Gramios along with the earth. Soon it leaped forward and attacked Gramios. The ever-cool sage casted numerous magic shields in front of him instantly. The demon's punch was soon stopped by that spell. The demon was shocked to find couldn't break it. Gramios replied that the demon's attack was impressive as it managed to break 2 of the 7 seraphs' shields. He says maybe only 1 layer would have been ruined if he speed chanted instead. Hearing about the shields, the demon was surprised because Gramios had just used a 2nd rank magic to stop its attack. The demon trembles at the scene and realizes it couldn't win against Gramios. Soon it tried to escape but stopped on its tracks. A huge shadow fell upon it, and it was shocking to see Gramios summon that thing with just speed casting. Gramios summoned an angel, which is a 1st rank magic. He ordered the sword angel to cut the demon lord into pieces. The angel then proceeded and killed him. The demon lord turned to ashes and met his demise. Gramios' purpose for coming to that barren and desolate land was done, so he decided to leave that place by using flight magic. Magic is an ability to bring forth something that can't be seen from one's inside to the outside world. If a normal human could go up against a demon with just intermediate magic, then 1st rank magic is an extremely powerful magic that can blow away a mountain with ease. The story falls back to when Gramios was a young boy and tried to be the best in his magic. Several other researchers look upon Gramios, either with amazement or contempt, but he had piled up countless contributions over the years. Since his age of 40, he had been forcefully pushed to carry on the title of a sage. In a way, he was used as a symbol of power and knowledge. At the same time, he was forced to keep things in check. There was a conflict between humankind and demons. Originally, small conflicts between human and demon did occur, but they would end soon after. However, someone wanted to change the course of this world. That someone was the powerful demon lord Gramios just defeated a moment ago. He just sat at the depth of the demon realm and instigated conflicts by giving the weaker demons on the surface weapons and supplies. Because of that, Gramios, being a sage and all, had to travel to many places to quell those conflicts. It was truly a big pain in the butt. When Gramios defeats demons at one place, he is bombarded with requests. He is informed that the monsters had appeared in the western capital and at the northern fortress. Gramios promises to sort it out. These requests are easy tasks for him, but he is fed up with those fights. He had no interest in conflicts in the first place, so he decided to take out the Demon Lord to save some trouble. With the ringleader gone, the conflicts have pretty much ended, but he still had one thing left to do in this life. So he speeds up and reaches his mansion. The building consists entirely of his children. They served as butler, maids, cook, and gardener. They were his proud creations and were pretty much his own child to Gramios. He says that they have served him well until now. He has made their bodies in such a way that they will perish with time, just like normal living beings. They also have a will, and Gramios asked them to do what they wish in the future. The servants became restless after hearing their master's words. Gramios revealed he was going to reincarnate. As of now, he is too well known. If someone is famous, they have to face a bunch of responsibility, expectations, and scorn. There will be many who want to get close to him, rely on him, and be wary of him. The moment he becomes famous, he also has to face many hassles. Oh right, he was even blamed for disasters which happened in his absence. Gramios laughed at that and mentioned he grew tired of it. He was tired of that life without any freedom. That's why he is going to reincarnate. He wants to live a life of freedom, where nobody knows who he is. The servants were shocked by this revelation. One more thing Gramios needs to tell them. Since their time with him is almost over, this is his final order for them. He ordered them to live their lives as they pleased and thanked them for everything. He left his mansion after that, and the servants said their final farewell to their master with overwhelmed emotions. After that, Gramios went to the place he prepared. Now, he has taken care of everything. He started the final preparation for his reincarnation. He casted Seal of Restraint on one of his hands. Soon, a strange mark appeared on the back of his right hand. Gramios looked at his seal and believed the one with 4 strokes wasn't quite enough, so he decided to cast another one on his left hand. He thinks that it'll probably be fine with those 2 seals. The Seal of Restraint is a special seal that limits magical powers. The more strokes the seal has, the stronger the restraint. The 4-stroke seal is the strongest. Normally, a 4-stroke seal is enough to stop a person from using magic completely. Despite having 2 4-stroke seals, Gramios' magical powers still surpass most people by a long shot. In order to engrave the seal, Gramios uses his left eye, the demonic eye of restraint. He can also erase the seals with his right eye, the holy eye of dispel. Those 2 eyes are his original creation, and he prepared it for his reincarnation. Since he will be reborn as a baby, it will be troublesome if a baby has immense magical power. With those preparations, Gramios prepared the spells for his reincarnation. After the spell, Gramios recalled memories from his childhood. He was banished to the basement of the house because his parents thought he was a cursed child. He lived in that dark room for the whole 10 years, and then he was saved by someone. Those dark memories made him wake up from his slumber in a new body. Now he was a young boy with black hair and black eyes. He looked at his reflection in the mirror and smiled. He is not a sage, but a cute young boy. He was satisfied with his new appearance. He regained his memories of his previous life, Sage Gramios. He looked at his hands and checked the Seal of Restraint. He planned to remove it by using his right holy eye. But he rejected that idea later. Since 200 years had passed before his reincarnation, he expected magic to be developed and result in many mages who could be as powerful as him. So he wanted to have the seal to restrain his magic so other mages can't detect his magic power. He wanted to keep the restraint until he learns about the outer world first, so he keeps these seals for now. But he needs to remember what kind of life he has been living till now. Gramios set a magic where he would remember previous life memories at the age 12, so he was confident about this age. But his current memories are jumbled, as a bunch of his previous life memories came back at once. Gramios was not worried about that, as he will remember that eventually. He turned to see the surroundings, and it was a broken shed with dirty clothes hanging around. He looked outside the room and found a small town. Gramios was sure that he is a commoner child now. Normally, commoners' children would leave the house at age 12 to find work. Meanwhile, the noble children at age 12 would go to boarding school. Either way, he was sure he could separate from others at that time and could attain freedom. That's why he chose age 12 to regain his memories. Now that he thinks about it, he still doesn't know his name. Suddenly, A man shouted the name Chris, Grumio's name after the incarnation, and entered the room forcefully. He cursed Chris for sleeping till late. Chris, by instant, greeted the man named Belga. He remembers Belga as his boss. Belga asked Chris to know his place, and he is no longer a noble kid anymore. Chris was shocked to find he is a noble. Chris began to think hard about Chris's past, but Belga thought Chris still hadn't accepted his fate. So he decided to remind Chris's past, which Gramios was in need of. Half a year ago, he was thrown out by the Alastor noble family. It was no surprise, since he was born with not one but two of magic restraint seals. To the Alastor noble house, he was simply an unwanted baggage. Chris found out that all the people misunderstood his restraint as a curse. So he was treated like a cursed child in the Alastor noble house. Before Chris was kicked out, he grew up in the mansion's basement as an abandoned child. He then finally got disowned and lost his noble title. After he got kicked out, he's been living in this shabby hut since. And he got the great Belga as his boss. Belga went on to brag himself as a kind boss for accepting an abandoned child like Chris. Now, Chris understood he didn't even get a decent education. The current Chris hasn't used magic even once, so Chris decided to hide the fact he could use magic. Seeing Chris spacing out, Belga punched him in the head, but he felt like he hit a rock and he got his hand injured. Chris activated Chantless magic with his instinct. Even though Belga was injured, he asks Chris to carry on his work. He provided Chris a mysterious bag. Curious Chris tried to open it, but Belga asked him to not use it as it was an important item. It's a charm to ward off monsters, and Belga asked Chris to use that inside the forest. Chris' job is to collect firewood, and Belga provided him a horse to use. Belga also refused to go with him as he had other important work to do, but he asked Chris to make sure to use that bell inside the forest. Chris agreed to his boss and changed his clothes to get ready for departure. After a while, Chris collected firewood inside the forest, but no matter how much he thought, it was weird to ask a child to collect firewood inside a forest full of monsters. But thanks to being alone, he can use magic to gather all this firewood. He then picked up the bell to ward off monsters. He used that, just like Belga asked. After ringing it, Chris used a hearing amplification magic to analyze the bell. It doesn't ward off monsters, but actually attracts them. The sound couldn't be heard by humans, and it could emit a sound over a long distance. But the sage Chris could say that the enchantment was poorly applied, and it would only attract monsters nearby. It seemed like someone really wanted to get rid of him, and gave a bell to Belga, but he couldn't think of anyone. Soon, his child's body was tired due to overwork. His brain is too sleepy right now from remembering his past life memories. So he decided to take a rest and think about it later. Soon the bell he had dropped from the carton rang. The sound was soon heard by goblins inside the forest. They gave that information to a huge, one-eyed Cyclops. It decided to go to the source of the sound. It seems Gramios was already facing a predicament after reincarnating. While Chris is traveling, he struggles to fall asleep due to a hard wooden cart. So he used magic and collected the leaves around the forest. Soon he gathered it all in his cart and created a soft flooring using those. With that, he decided to sleep, and he regained all of his memories of both lives. Everyone around him thinks he can't use magic. In his previous life, he was a famous sage, Gramios. His countless achievements made him extremely famous. Unfortunately, this made his life extremely troublesome, as he had to use his power to help solve many problems. The tired and worn-out Gramios then placed 2 restraint seals on himself to limit his power. He was reborn as Chris Alastor, a child born from the Alastor noble house and reincarnated with his sage soul. The purpose of the 2 restraint seals was to hide his enormous magical power after reincarnation. However, these 2 seals seemed immediately seen as a curse after he was reborn with them. Because of that, he was locked up in the mansion's basement and grew up there. He also did not even receive any education. About half a year ago, the Alastor house finally disowned him and kicked him out of the mansion. These 2 seals have made his life pretty miserable. Finally, he remembered everything about his past life on his 12th birthday. Due to 40 years' worth of memories coming all at once, his memories are still a bit jumbled up. Even though he has spent most of his life in the mansion basement, he can still recall some happy memories as well. Back when he was locked up in the basement, another child came to see him, claiming that he was Chris' brother. He felt sorry for Chris banishing like that, but he was soon dragged out by someone who didn't want him to hang out with Trash Chris. But from then on, he will always sneak inside and teach Chris numerous things, like writing. Chris was happy to meet his brother, Marco. While he was thinking, the birds in the forest left their nest due to the arrival of Cyclops. This huge creature left other small monsters in fear. Suddenly, a horse came running toward Chris, and the rider called Chris. He immediately recognizes his big brother's voice. Chris was happy to see his brother. Marco is also glad to see Chris is alright. He is a kind big brother who taught him how to read and write when he lived in the basement. Marco was worried when he heard that Chris went into that forest by himself, so he rushed here to find him. Out of all the people in the noble house, he was the only one on his side. Marco also heard Chris was given that dangerous thing, so he asked Chris about the bell he received from Belga. Chris knew that Marco was talking about the bell that attracts monsters. He reassured Marco to not worry, as that bell can't call strong monsters. Then he realized his mistake. He almost admitted that he measured the bell's magic power. He pretended to not use it, and Marco was glad to hear that. Chris used magic to recall the bell to his hand to cover the whole story. He also showed the firewood he collected to Marco. The latter was surprised to see that absurd amount. It was almost like Chris used magic, but Marco knew Chris can't use magic with seals like that. He patted Chris for his achievement. Chris felt a bit sorry not telling him he did use magic, but he was curious about what Big Brother said. He assumed he was abandoned and locked up because he could not use magic. But after hearing what Big Brother said just now, it seems people believe that these markings seal away one's magic power instead of just limiting it. Gramaeos developed these seals to apply them to himself, though he did not think they would have this much of a strong effect on others. Soon he was bewildered when Marco covered for him. A loud voice resounded that it would be best if he did not involve himself with that trash. A girl appeared from inside the forest with a horse. Marco argued that she was the one who handed the bell to Chris and misled him, that it was for warding off monsters. But she snickered, asking whether he had any evidence. Seeing that, Chris rang the bell once again and analyzed it. He soon found out the girl has the same magic trace as the bell. Chris recalled her as someone who separated Marco from him always. She always mistreated Chris for being trash. It was Chris and Marco's big sister, Elizaveta. Marco is angry at her for leaving Chris to forest alone, even though he cannot use magic. Eliza also agreed to that, but it doesn't matter to her if a trash Chris were to die. Even though Eliza did such a horrible thing, Marco couldn't speak against her. Chris noticed there was such a big gap in their positions. If he looks at their magical powers, they are pretty similar. Chris thought that people of the current era don't worry about magic ability and give preferences to age. But he couldn't be more wrong. Eliza thinks highly of herself and ridiculed Marco could become another servant of the house. But Marco still refused to stand down for his brother Chris. Suddenly, they heard a huge sound which seemed to be getting louder. Soon, a huge Cyclops made its appearance inside the forest. The goblins also confronted them and cut their retreat route. They were completely surrounded. Eliza was terrified at the scene, but Chris was amazed by that. It is a strange combination he does not see very often. The bell had the ability to attract small monsters like goblins, but they didn't have the ability to attract strong monsters like Cyclops. They won't hang around the human territory since they do not interfere much with humans. He wondered whether the bell really had attracted them. He was immersed in thinking and ignored Marco's warning. This certainly piques his interest. When he was thinking, the Cyclops moved near Chris and attacked him with a club. Marco saves Chris by pushing him away, but now he was in danger of losing his life. But Chris was thankful to Marco for saving him this trouble. Chris soon casted a magic barrier and saved Marco in time. No matter how much the Cyclops attacked, his attacks got blocked. Marco was surprised to see a powerful barrier in front of him. He came to the conclusion that he deployed this unconsciously. Chris let his guard down, since he is used to speed chanting defensive magic. It won't do him any good if others discover he can use magic. Thanks to Marco jumping in, he is saved. He also managed to fool Eliza that Marco was the one who deployed that magic. Eliza was shocked to see a low-tier man like Marco create a huge barrier. As Eliza was shocked, the goblins used that chance to catch her. She was pushed down from the horse and the goblins surrounded them. Even though Eliza was rude, Marco was concerned about her. But Chris knows Eliza will be fine since she has enough power to deal with something like a bunch of goblins. The problem is the big guy. He was hitting the barrier continuously, as he was proud of his strength. Marco also knew how long he could hold out the barrier, so he asked Chris to use that chance to run away. But he can't do that since Marco does not have enough power to take down Cyclops yet. Chris can't use his magic to take down the Cyclops either. He didn't want the others to find out that he can use magic. Regardless, he had to take care of the situation. In his past life, he worked as a slave due to numerous requests from people. He doesn't want to live a troublesome life like before. Everything is for the sake of his freedom. Now, he is in a pinch and doesn't know what to do. Let's assess the situation. It was strange for goblins and Cyclops to team up. Eliza is taking on the goblins. With her magic level, there is nothing to worry about. On the other hand, Marco, who is taking on Cyclops, has little chance of winning. He can get rid of these monsters easily, but since he was supposed to hide that he can use magic on a screen, it would not be ideal to show his magic right now. After all, if people find out how powerful he is, this life will end up becoming just like his previous life. In his previous life as Sage Grameos, he made the mistake of showing his power to the world. Because of that, he had his hands full with helping people and fulfilling their requests. He had enough of that tiresome life and reincarnated. Therefore, he will not repeat the same mistake and hide his powers. He needs to defeat Cyclops. While hiding, he could use magic. He plans to knock out Marco and Eliza and defeat the monster while they are unconscious. However, it won't work since it will be hard to provide a decent explanation. The best option might be to instant boost Marco's magic. He would exceed his limits because of the boost, and his body will be greatly overburdened. After all, it does not seem like he can defeat the Cyclops with just a small boost. Suddenly, Marco shouted while looking at Eliza's side. Chris turned around and was shocked. She is being beaten mercilessly by those goblins. Marco decided to save Eliza and used a spell, but his choice of spell worried Chris. Marco used a fireball spell against the goblins, but the fireball was only small in size, and the damage was negligible. At one glance, Chris could see Marco's attribute is wind, but he is using fire. On the other hand, Chris wonders why Eliza didn't use fire magic when she has an affinity for that. With Eliza's magic power, she could recast it within 4 seconds. She probably hasn't learned wide area magic, but even if she keeps casting simple offensive magic, she should have no problem with those goblins. But Eliza was only using support magic to buff her strength and agility instead. Marco was taken back, as he can't understand what Chris meant by compatibility and recast time. Now Chris was taken back, because those are the basics of magic, but Marco has no knowledge about it. Eliza was being ravaged by the goblins, and Chris wondered whether in the current age, multicast is the standard. Maybe that's why recast time is not taken into consideration. It is even weirder that he does not know about compatibility, or perhaps magic that developed to the point where they can just disregard the compatibility. If multicast is the standard, that is quite a big development. Amazingly, they have managed to do that much in just 200 years. However, even if they have achieved such an amazing breakthrough, Eliza is too slow with her decision-making. Marco's shout made Chris come back to his senses, but he is not obligated to save someone who wanted him dead. It seemed like Marco would be sad if Eliza died, but Chris doesn't want to save Eliza by revealing his magic powers, since it would be weird for a locked-up kid to be knowledgeable about magic. He doesn't want to waste his reincarnation by saving Eliza. The risk is too high. Marco is also worried about Eliza, but Chris' hands are too tied right now. In desperation, Marco cursed the seals he had on. Chris wondered how Marco was knowledgeable about his seals. It was created by him solely for himself, and there was no way it was leaked to anyone. So he inquired Marco about the seals. Marco berated him for acting strange, as he also has the seal. Chris confirmed that Marco was talking about the seal of restraint, but the world also lingered in his mind. Marco then showed the same seal on his back. It is the same seal, but the stroke number is different. Meanwhile, Cyclops is still trying to break the shield. Chris was shocked, but he can make use of this. He asked Marco to use a fireball once again, but Marco argued that the attack was still weak, and it wouldn't work. He wants to get the goblins away from Big Sister first, but Chris asked Marco to trust him. Since there is no loss in trying, Marco began to chant to use fireball. Chris doesn't know how Marco got that seal, but he can use his demonic left eye and holy right eye to take care of it, since he also reincarnated with those eyes. Marco magic was being held back by the seal, and Chris decided to remove it. But when Chris used his holy eye of dispel, Marco coincidentally noticed it. He clearly saw Chris's eye glowing, but dismissed it as his imagination. He continued to enchant the fireball spell, but this time, Marco clearly felt the difference. He is able to cast magic with much force, but Chris knew that Marco would only be able to use 5th rank magic, which was not enough to defeat the Cyclops. So Chris decided to help Marco with instant boost. The boost increased Marco's power on top of having his seal removed. Marco formed a huge fireball. Marco was surprised by that, but he threw it nonetheless. The fireball landed on the Cyclops, and it was thrown away by the impact. The sound of the impact attracted the goblins, and they stopped attacking Eliza. In the end, the Cyclops was thrown back again into the forest. This event totally shocked the goblins. Chris then inquired the goblins whether they want to take on his big brother, who just blew that Cyclops away. The goblins became terrified and escaped from that place. Marco sighed as a sense of relief. He then sat down as he was exhausted by the events. Chris went on to praise his big brother, but Marco explains it was not him that created the strong barrier and the big fireball. Marco found out that Chris was the one who casted those, but Chris showed him signs to not disclose the fact about his magic. Marco ended his speech there and inquired whether Big Brother's magic is cool. He pats Chris, pretending he does not know. Chris was moved by Marco's kindness, but Eliza, the evil sister, cursed Chris as trash. Big sister Eliza, in only a short time, she got beat up pretty badly by many goblins. Chris worried whether Eliza found that he used magic. She approached them in that tattered state and accused Chris for using that. Chris worried whether his new life would once again end up like the previous one. Luckily, Eliza accused Chris for using the cursed bell to attract the monsters. She framed Chris for their state, but Chris was glad that his secret was not revealed. Marco tried to stand up for Chris, but she shot him down. Eliza planned to shift all the blame to Chris. Eliza was the one who gave the bell to Chris to kill him, and she got injured because she was too weak. In the end, Chris decided to go with the flow and accepted that the whole incident was his fault. While Eliza was cursing him, he pondered about a way to get out of that predicament. Eliza exiled Chris from their territory, and Chris gladly accepted the punishment. Eliza was mad since she didn't get the reaction she expected. She once again explained that Chris could never land in the Alestor territory again, nor could he use the Alestor family name. But Chris accepted all those conditions with a happy face. In front of the happy Chris, she got even more humiliated. She asked Chris to get out of their territory by the end of that day. Marco couldn't believe Eliza was that serious about Chris's exile. But Eliza refused to hear words from the low-tier trash. She even dislikes Chris calling him sister. Since Eliza refused to be his sister, Chris began to treat her like his enemy. He secretly used his demonic eye and imprinted a new seal on her. Chris hopes his sister will like his present. Since she cursed Marco as low tier, he placed a much higher seal than Marco's on her. Chris was curious about what face Eliza would make when she discovered that seal. Chris was the only one who was happy to be exiled. Chris thanked Marco for keeping the secret about him using magic. However, Marco was confused about why Chris wanted to hide his magic power and preferred to be exiled. Other people would always choose the former over the latter. Chris explains he wants to live freely by himself. Marco liked to go out with Chris to protect him, but now it was unnecessary since Chris was proficient in magic. Marco inquired about Chris's plans going forward, but Chris had no idea about that. He just wants to be free. In this life, he's been locked up since he was born, because he was an unwanted child, and in the previous life he was bound to duties and requests from others. So he wanted to enjoy freedom in this life. Hearing that, Marco suggests Chris to become an adventurer. Chris also liked Marco's idea. An adventurer are people who explore the world and fulfill requests in return for monetary awards. They are the true essence of freedom. Adventurers from 200 years ago were also like that. Seeing Chris's reaction, Marco found Chris also liked that idea. But sadly, it's time to say goodbye. Marco hugged Chris to bid farewell. Chris thanked Marco for everything till now, and asked him to be healthy. Marco asked him to write him letters from time to time. After that, Marco boarded the cart full of firewood and drove it back to the mansion. Marco is confident Chris can become rank A, no S-rank adventurer. Chris waved his hands to Marco's shout. Then it was time for Chris to leave that boring place. However, Chris doesn't feel like taking on job, but he also doesn't want to break the promise with Marco. He doesn't know much about ranks, but it sounds like something that'll make him stand out. If he makes a name for himself, many people want to use him, and he'll end up like his previous life. Even though becoming an adventurer sounds quite nice, and it has freedom, Chris can't think of a way not to stand out if he becomes one, so he denied that idea. He laments about the waste of such an opportunity. That's when Chris noticed Cyclops hiding behind the trees, which ran away back then. The Cyclops came out from hiding, explained to Chris. Surprisingly, the reincarnated sage could communicate with monsters. Initially, they were shocked to see Cyclops get blown away like that. But then they found it strange that Cyclops doesn't have any injuries. That's why they were waiting there for a chance to speak with Chris. It made Chris laugh, and he explains that's because of his magic. When he instantaneously boosted his big brother's fireball, he cast a defensive barrier on Mr. Cyclops. While he did need to show Big Sister that the monsters have been taken care of, there was no need to harm them. The goblins are moved by that and shed tears. Then they knelt down and thanked him. Still, Chris must say that's something he doesn't see very often, goblins worrying about Cyclops. Goblins felt it was given, since they called him. But what they meant, calling him. One of the goblins then pulled out a horn from its crotch. Chris was surprised to see a rare item, a bugle of summoning. They found it at their old hide. One of the goblins received the horn and used it to send the Cyclops back to its home. The goblins and Cyclops waved back at each other, and it was a heartwarming scene. The Bugle of Summoning is the item that summons a strong monster according to the user's magic, and unsummons the monster on the second use. Chris didn't expect to see that there. After Cyclops left, Chris criticizes goblins for attacking humans, but they don't usually do that. So why do they attack humans? The goblins then once again tear down and complain to Chris. But Chris's magic for talking with monsters isn't perfect yet. The goblins were originally living at an abandoned fortress. A short while ago, a group of robbers came and drove them out. So they called Cyclops to help them reclaim the fortress. But the robbers weren't scared one bit and gave them an evil stare. The poor goblins got scared and ran away. The summoned monster is supposed to follow the summoner. So when the guys ran away, the Cyclops had no choice but to follow them. After that, they were wandering about it for a while and heard the sound of the bell. They came to check the source of sound and found two humans. They decided to vent their anger on them. Chris felt the goblins are quite pitiful. Chris pondered whether to help the goblins reclaim their hideout, since, if left alone, they may end up attacking other peoples again. He doesn't want the Alestor house to know he can use magic, but he is already far away, so it'll probably be okay to use much magic. So, Chris decided to help the goblins and asked them to guide him there. However, he didn't know at that time. Because of these seals, it wasn't a good idea for him to use magic, despite getting kicked out of the Alestor house and all. After traveling for some distance, Chris and the goblins reached the abandoned castle. They heard the loud noises of robbers, cheering from inside. Chris wanted to reclaim the place where the goblins lived peacefully. When Chris moved ahead, the goblins asked him to take any weapons. But Chris had his magic to help, since no one knows about the details of his birth and the seal. This is the first step to Chris-free life. Chris is going to use the robbers as warm-up, and there is no way he would stand out from that. Inside the abandoned fortress, the robbers are enjoying the drinks as the wagon raid is a success. One of his men wondered why they brought that older man instead of killing him, but their boss criticizes him as they won't make any money if they directly killed him. He planned to make some profit by selling him. The boss kidnaps many of the people, including that older man. The old man pleaded with the robbers to overlook the children. But why does the boss have to hear the words of a loser? Suddenly a little girl exclaimed as fine since he came. The girl's name is Shirley, and she had blonde hair and blue eyes. She once again exclaimed loudly, "She will be fine since he came." The other people can't understand her words, but a soft voice really calms them down. However, they knew there's no way for someone to come to a desolate place like that. Suddenly, Chris arrived there exclaiming his presence. Shirley is happy to see him, but Chris was startled at the unexpected scene. The robbers were shocked to find a little kid out of nowhere. Surprisingly, none of the prisoners died yet. The boss asks Chris who he was. Chris proclaims that he is there to teach the robbers a lesson. The robbers burst into laughter at the words of the little kid. They may laugh now, but Chris planned to show them the Alistair family's magic. As Chris moves his hand to cast magic, the older man notices the seal on his hands. He exclaimed, "It's hopeless to achieve with such a low-level seal." The boss of the robbers sees Chris looks like a girl, and they could sell him for a lot of money. Chris was surprised to hear the exact words, like a low-level seal. He thought that it was just a nickname of him by the Alistair family. But now the prisoners are also able to recognize his seal. Then Chris looks at the robbers, and they also have the exact same seal. Chris is shocked to learn there are others having the seal of restraint other than him and Marco. He thought Marco got his seal from messing up his transferring magic, so he didn't pay much mind. Then he analyzed the seal of restraint to be low-leveled, and many people in this world have a seal of restraint. So using magic with the seal would cause problems for him. So Chris surrendered. Then he decided to make a retreat for now. The robber boss tells his men to capture Chris. He is now in a bad situation. However, he can't use his magic carelessly now. If they know about the seal, then he can't use the magic, otherwise he would stand out. Chris ponders about other ways, besides using magic. He retreated back to the entrance. He asks the goblins for help, and asks them to close the door. Soon the goblins locked the door, and locked the robbers inside the mansion. Chris thanked goblins for their timely help. Then Chris casted magic on the door, so no matter how much the robbers tried, they couldn't break it. Outside the mansion, the goblins showed Chris they also had seals on them. Chris came to know that not only humans, but the creatures also have seals. The goblins clarified that some of them don't have seals. However, if seals are this widely known, then that's more of a reason not to use magic. Chris planned to leave all this to someone else, like helping Marco. Inside, the boss of the robbers tried to break the door and shouted, "He knew Chris is a magician." This gave Cheers a brand new idea. He decided to call himself a magician who uses special items. If he showed them the power of creatures by buffing them, then no one would doubt him, even if he uses strong magic. Now, Chris won't stand out too much as an adventurer. In the end, Chris decided to become a magician adventurer. But now, he has to trick them into thinking he is a magician. Chris proposed to fight together with the goblins to reclaim the place from the robbers. But the goblins were scared to fight the robbers, and Chris' recruitment plan failed within seconds. Then, the goblins gave their bugle of summoning to Chris. Chris knew the horn was the valuable item they had now. They want Chris to use the horn instead of asking them to fight the robbers. Chris could use a horn to summon monsters, but he won't know what the creatures will look like until he tests them out. However, if a powerful creature was summoned, it would reveal his magic power. But he also wants to take back the goblins' place from the robbers. They even went through the trouble of giving this to him, so he can't put it to waste. The robbers decided to call more members for help to break the door. But Chris didn't want that. If they still can't open the door with a lot of people, they will find Chris' magic is powerful. Now there is no choice but to use horn for now. He blew the horn and wished for a medium-strength monster. Then a huge summoning circle appeared in the sky. This scene even startled the robbers inside the castle. Soon a huge tail came out of the portal. Chris guessed the monster from its tail. It was none other than the dragon. The robbers were shocked to see the most powerful monster on the continent. Now, Chris realizes he messed up big time. Now he can't deny he has strong magic power when he summons a dragon. The dragon turned to get permission to wreak havoc from Chris. But he doesn't want the dragon to reveal that he was its summoner at the same time. Chris wanted to control the dragon as best as he could. Before anything goes bad, he wants to blow horn again and have him come back. But the horn cracks down, as it can't withstand Chris's magic power. Now, Chris has no way to control the dragon. The dragon soon released its huge magic power and froze everyone in their places. The dragon soon released a fire attack on the people inside the castle. Chris tried to stop it and casted some magic in front of its mouth. The dragon's fire passed through the circle and reached the people inside the castle. Every robber inside the castle got attacked with fire. The prisoners also prepared for their own death, but they didn't get burned by the fire. They don't know what's happening around them, except Shirley, who seems to know something. Outside the castle, Chris activated his magic. He wanted to use that situation to his advantage and settle the problem without standing out. He wants to laze around the world and be free. Inside the castle, the dragon's fire didn't scorch them, but instead healed their injuries. They were beyond shocked at the moment. The magic used by Chris is called God Vision. The magic circle he cast before the dragon's mouth has the following effect. First, it protects against the dragon's fire and nullifies it. Then it bestows upon the flames the ability to heal the tied-up prisoners. In short, it heals those who can't escape. It would only affect the robbers who are not tied up. It will burn their clothes to a crisp and put them to sleep. Everyone will think the dragon's flames did it all. Chris will enter once the flames have died down, and then free anybody tied up. So from the outside, it will look like the situation resolved without him doing anything. That's when Chris noticed someone beginning to spoil his plans. One of the prisoners freed himself. He wanted others to run away with him, since the robbers can't see them through the flames. Chris didn't want that to happen though. If they move around, they will also be stripped down and put to sleep just like the robbers. He didn't want the prisoners to go through that. Surprisingly, Shirley stopped everyone from moving around. After that, even when the flames engulfed their body, they didn't move an inch. Chris was surprised to see prisoners following the words of a little girl. Chris was thankful for her help, but he was also confused at the same time. Now, Chris needed to take care of the dragon first. Soon the flames of the dragon died down. The dragon was surprised to see everyone well, even after its attack. It got mad and plans to use its fire once again. But Chris called it out before it tried to do anything funny. The dragon is irritated at first, but it soon feels the immense magic power emerging from Chris, which he releases. It had no choice but to surrender. Chris patted the dragon, which submitted to him. In a way, the horn summoning a dragon is a good choice, since the dragons get attached to people with strong magic power. In the end, Chris managed to save the prisoners and crushed the robbers, but now he has another new problem. He doesn't know what to do with the dragon. Since the horn broke, he couldn't send it back home. The dragon can return to its home by itself, but it wished to stay with Chris. Since he summoned the dragon, he also bears some responsibility. Though he wishes the dragon to be smaller, so he wouldn't stand out, the dragon read his thoughts and transformed. It changed its appearance to a cute lizard with wings. Chris was amazed to see the dragon turning into a mini version of itself. It only means the dragon is around 2,000 years old. The dragon cuddles with Chris, and he laughs as it tickles him. Now there was no problem with traveling together. Soon the goblins ran away to hide as they heard the footsteps of humans approaching. Chris also asked the dragon to hide as well. Soon the prisoners came outside and noticed Chris. He was glad to see them all safe, but he needed to do some acts to convince them. Soon he acted like was totally scared and hugged the old man. The latter also consoled him, and Chris pondered about magic to make him act better. Then he asked them how they were safe, even after being engulfed in flames of the dragon, since not asking that question would make them suspicious of him. The old man explained that flames of the dragon healed all their injuries. When the flames died down, they also found the robbers asleep without a scratch on their bodies. In the end, they rounded all the robbers and tied them up inside the wagon. The prisoners believed the dragon was sent by a god. Everything went according to Chris's plan, but he still wondered why Shirley sat amidst the fire when everyone was untying themselves. Suddenly, Shirley came there and introduced herself. She was the girl who first smiled when she saw him. However, it seems like Shirley could read his thoughts. The prisoners were glad to hear Shirley's advice. Then they also noticed Chris, who proclaimed before he would save them. They were concerned for him since Chris looked extremely fragile. But they still wondered how Chris planned to fight robbers at that time. Since he had 2 seals, it would make no sense for him to use magic. He then decides to introduce himself as New Chris. He called out the mini dragon flying in the sky. It soon came and sat on his hand. The prisoners were surprised by that. He introduces himself as a monster tamer, Chris and Minnie as his partner. But the prisoners didn't see the Minnie the first time Chris made his appearance. Chris explained that Minnie away as it was easily frightened. So he also made his retreat at that time. He wanted Minnie to play along with him. He managed to form a contract using a special item. The old man kept asking questions, which made Chris wonder if Monster Tamer was rare. The old man pondered whether the dragon was controlled by someone. Chris acted like he was thinking for some time. He then lied that it was impossible to control a dragon, even with rare items. The other 2 prisoners also agreed with that, since they saw the huge-sized dragon before. They joke that only Sage Gramos was capable of controlling dragons. Chris was shocked to hear his name out of them. Since they were already late to Alestor territory, the old man asked everyone to board the wagon. They bid farewell to Chris since he is traveling in the opposite direction. But with that interaction, Chris came to know his name was passed down from the past. Shirley, the little girl, waited for everyone to go and moved closer to Chris. She referred to Chris as Sage and thanked him. Chris was shocked to hear that. Then he noticed Shirley's eyes shining. Soon, Shirley also left the place, as it was time for the prisoners to leave. Soon they all left the place, and Chris waved them until they were out of his sight. But Shirley's eyes almost threatened to suck him in. They are the holy eyes, with the power to see the future, so it was no wonder the other prisoners listened to her. But she also exclaimed to see Chris again, which meant they would meet in the future. But it was now his time to leave that place. He called the goblins back from the hiding, as all the humans had left. In the end, the goblins were able to return to their homes. However, The 2 magic restraint seals on his hands are called low-level seals, and many humans and monsters have similar seals on their bodies. His past name has remained even 200 years in the future, and there's Shirley, a girl with the mysterious power to see the future. There's so many things he don't understand. Though he does know if he is not careful, his name will be passed down for another 200 years. He might not know much, but he wanted to live with a spirit of adventure. After rescuing the home of goblins, Chris embarked on his journey. At first, he decided to gather information, but before that he wanted to eat first. Thus, the life of the reincarnated sage as an adventurer begins. Please like and subscribe to see the future endeavors of Great Sage Chris and share your thoughts in comments.